Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ventures podcast. I'm excited about today's episode with Josh Vitulli. Today, we dive into all things Metaverse, specifically Web3 Metaverses, specifically Decentraland. And obviously, Metaverse, hot topic today. It's not just in Web3, plenty of Web2 and centralized versions of Metaverses that are out there. But today we dive into Decentraland, why Josh is super into it, what the project is that he's working on. We get into as much technical detail, a little bit of technical detail about how to actually build on Decentraland right now. We also just take a step back kind of toward the beginning about design. What is design? I actually really love Josh's answer to that question. So I'm excited to be able to share this episode with you. If you are listening, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com, and there I'll have links to a bunch of the different topics we talk about, because there's definitely some technical things that are going to require some homework and some background reading on. And if you're watching, you can also listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures. It should show up. So with that, please enjoy this conversation with Josh Vitulli. All right, Josh, welcome to the show.
Hey, Will, thanks for having me today.
Pretty fired up about this conversation for a wide variety of reasons. Obviously, you and I have been talking about Web3 for quite some time, Metaverse, NFTs, why this actually matters, how this is fun, and all of that. Would you mind just kicking us off? Tell us a little bit, for those who don't know you, a little bit about you and your journey thus far.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I come from a very non-tech space. I pretended to be a computer science major in undergrad and learned some Java and decided I didn't want to be a little code monkey. So I got out, which was probably a poor decision because those skills would come in handy today. But it did set me off on a path where I ended up doing economic development work internationally, came back to the US and was in grad school for urban design and planning. And then I stumbled into work with an architecture and design firm called Gensler, and I spent about 8 years there doing work in the analytics side. We kind of pioneered design analytics in the space as we thought about human behavior and how it intersects with space. And then spent a lot of time with the innovation team in New York, and we were basically doing corporate consulting for internal innovation endeavors. And that was where I really started getting exposed to a lot of Web 3.0 stuff, because I was kind of tasked with being the futurist out there on the team. And so I remember finding, the first inklings of like a metaverse in 2017 and bringing it to these organizations and talking to them about what a metaverse could be in terms of a brand play, how it could be an innovation space, how it could be a creative space. And they all pretty much just laughed at me. And I guess that's because I'm not Mark Zuckerberg and I can't wave a magic wand and make people believe the next big thing. But it also sent me on kind of my own personal journey and pulled me out of that larger creative agency space. And I started using the metaverse as a teaching tool to bring organizations into a different creative environment and help them see the possibilities. So one of my projects is called Longtail Studios, and that's one of the places that we use the metaverse as a learning tool to help people kind of piece together the future along with some other learning modalities. And then just because I started paying attention to this space, and the crypto swell last year kind of brought a lot of immediacy to it, I started collecting Mana, which is the native token for the Ethereum-based metaverse Decentraland. And in about, maybe June or July last year, I'd finally accumulated enough Mana at a reasonable price to pick up a parcel, which is one of the 90,000 finite supply of land NFT tokens. And before I pulled the trigger, I went and talked to a couple friends and family, and we were able to pool a little bit more Mana together, and we became the owners of a 4-parcel estate, which was a pretty exciting moment. And that was kind of the concretization of like moving into this environment. So where that kind of stands now is I've been recruiting a development team. So we've got a game designer who's based in Japan, and a digital designer who's trained as an architect, who's based in New York with me. And so we're just about to embark on our development journey. And we've got a lot of crazy ideas right now, and we'll see how it goes.
Amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to diving in to more of that. But maybe before we get that, a lot of the audience are technical people, people writing code, engineer types, finance analyst types. I'd love to just take a step back and talk about design, right? In Web3, we talk a lot about different rabbit holes. To you, what is design, and why does that matter? Why does that question matter or not matter?
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of show my cards here and my vulnerability because it's been evolving for me recently. So prior to, let's say, 2020, I was um, a behavioral determinist. And so I thought design played a really, really powerful role in our lives and helped shape, our paradigm, how we interact. It was basically, the environmental context that kind of almost instructed us to be like civil human civilization beings.
Hmm.
And I that's part of the reason I went into urban planning is I was like,
Sure.
I'm a social engineer. I'm not afraid to admit it. And like,
Yeah.
that's what I think when I think of the power of design is it's able to help us make those like millions of micro decisions we make throughout the entire day. It helps us make better versions of those instead of kind of like, the systems two thinking where you're going to slow it down and really reflect and be deliberate and make an intentional choice. So when I was coming into urban design and planning, it was really like, how can we use the environment to be better people? And so at the time, I was reading a lot of stuff on crime prevention through environmental design, and trying to understand how that could help, us build safer, happier, flourishing cities. As I was moving more and more into the workplace design world, that was really when we started to get to like a micro level of how design could interact. So, we started playing with color theory on like how color would stimulate different moods or different
Hmm.
modes of thinking. So if you're in, a creative space, do you want it to be this refined, polished conference room, or do you want it to be more like a hacker house where, everything is built on the fly?
Hmm.
And so I started to see design as a really co-creative experience where it's not just the space exerting pressure or choice or power on the individual, but more where the individual and the space kind of reinforce each other. So if I were to talk about like office design now and ignoring the whole hybrid conversation, like I think the ideal environment is to have a designer and like a carpenter and a big giant open space and saws and wood and just build the space around you as you need. So I've kind of almost done like a 180 or almost a full 360 in how I conceive
Wow.
of space. And that even applies to now the digital world where there are no limitations and it's a completely co-creative experience when you're in the metaverse. And I guess that's something we can get to because some of the metaverses are going to be more co-creative than others.
Wow. Okay, I was even a little nervous about asking the question because some people roll their eyes at that question, but I think your answer lens is basically a softball tee up for the analogies of what Web3 is trying to do, right? Because Web3 is trying to turn the internet upside down.
Right.
Instead of you have lots of different identities and all these different Web2 providers, you're going to have your own identity, and you're going to permission in different parts of your data into metaverses and other brands and other experiences in real life. Um, Even though, like, what is IRL? That whole question is going to be interesting this century. But uh, with all of our youth interacting in metaverses, basically already, like, what is real life? So obviously, I live up in the mountains in the woods, so I'm still a huge fan. And I love that. What was that Iceland? The Icelandverse or whatever. I'm going to link to it in the show notes.
Oh
But
yeah.
that was hilarious. So, okay, and what I was alluding to just now is that the softball is that in Web3, I I thought a lot, and I and many others have been thinking about how can we design game theory mechanics to use Web3 blockchains, decentralized autonomous organizations, etc., to facilitate good behavior in the same way that you originally approached design, thinking deterministically that design could influence behavior, and you've kind of come full circle. Maybe I'll just ask you the question. Do you think, based on your observations and interactions and work with people and design, do you think there's a way that we can make Web3, we can build Web3, we can design Web3 that can actually shape human behavior? Or are we going to need to just be carpenter and designer and build this out as we go? How can we do good with Web3 and not let all the bad things just take over?
I mean, I guess that starts with thinking about what the bad things are. And first and foremost to me for like Web 2.0 is like, it comes down to advertising dollars, right? Basically, our entire web infrastructure is based on commerce and advertising dollars. And I think that's where we start to get into really interesting conversations in the Web 3.0 space, and especially the spaces I'm playing in, which are more community driven. But you've already, like, if you were to jump into Decentraland today and like walk around the plaza, you would hear like conversations about how people don't want Facebook to buy it, how it is this community project, how it is about like autonomous governance. And so I think the communities that embrace the opportunities maybe of Web 3.0 can avoid some of those, I think, pitfalls of Web 2.0. And, you know, beyond marketing, I guess the other major one would be kind of the political discourse or the social discourse or the social contract or whatever we want to call it. And how expressed in Web 2.0, there's, you know, a lot of animosity. We've got Twitter and Facebook in the courthouses trying to figure out who they can and cannot banish from speaking. And you're not necessarily seeing that pop up in Web 3.0 yet. So I don't think we've necessarily ossified what the like vibe of the space is. So in, again, the project I'm most involved in with Decentraland, you see a lot of like community policing of behavior in like a really soft, gentle, but like, hey guys, that's not cool kind of way. So if somebody shows up in the public square and they're dropping like racist stuff, people will usher them out quickly. There's actually a mechanism to ban people by group vote.
Wow.
So that people can get kicked out. It is run as a distributed autonomous organization. So anybody that holds mana, land, or any sort of NFT asset has proportional voting power. So it is being governed in that way. And I guess the concern right now is just that we're moving into a moment where it's going to get very expensive for people to enter the marketplace right now. So, you know, when I was able to purchase my estate, you know, it was 1/5 of what it costs now. And right now, the average parcel is going for between probably $15,000 and $25,000. So the opportunity for the small folks to get in and kind of like own the assets that are going to be the foundation for these metaversal futures is probably closing. And I think that's probably the biggest danger is how do the creatives, how do the content creators, how do the coders and the writers, how do they interact with a system that is quickly like commercializing, quickly becoming too expensive to enter. And so that's one of the things I think we're considering with our project is we have like 150,000 square feet of developable virtual land. So there is floor area ratio restrictions in the metaverse.
Or at least that metaverse, yeah.
Yeah, at least this one. So we are thinking about like, okay, how do we make that space extensible so it's more accessible so that if someone is an artist in Nairobi, like how can they use what we're developing to be their access point of the metaverse? And so I think that's the biggest fear is we start pricing people out. And you've already seen, you know, a lot of big name corporations moving into the space. Nike's patenting stuff and they have an exhibition in Roblox. Sotheby's has a $900,000 gallery in Decentraland. Tokens.com just spent $2.4 million on an estate, which they're, I think, turning into a shopping center. So the price points and the level of sophistication are just going to ratchet up here in the next, you know, 5 to 10 years.
Got it. Wow. Okay. We jumped right in, but let's maybe back up a minute. What is Decentraland? Maybe just what is Metaverse? where's Decentraland in the metaverse? What's up with the Facebook thing? Can you talk just a little bit about kind of laying out the metaverse playground for us, and then what specifically is that you're excited about for Decentraland?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of articles out there with the headline "What is the metaverse right now?" Right, and it seems everyone has a different definition. I mean, I think the simplest definition is that it's an alternative reality that occurs in the digital landscape that allows people to connect regardless of distances, connect and transact and
Mm.
interact.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so there's been metaverse around for a while. I mean, I don't know the age of your audience, Will, but I'm guessing that most people are old enough to remember Second Life
Mm.
or to remember The Sims or SimCity. And those were just games, metaverse developed as games essentially. And some of them still have like a thriving community within them and interact and pay for things. So those were kind of our first inklings of the metaverse, and I think they've more or less evolved from there. I guess it's also obligatory to mention that Neil Stephenson coined the term metaverse in his 1992 book Snow Crasher. I think that was the title there, and that seems to be the factoid that everyone feels is really important. But most of us have probably experienced it through movies. To be honest, The Matrix is not a bad impersonation of the metaverse.
Mm.
Ready Player One is very much a metaverse sci-fi novel. Um, and I think what we're seeing today is kind of the expression along a spectrum between thinking of the metaverse as like the future of work and thinking of the metaverse as the future of play. So, kind of where Facebook and Microsoft and those larger established software legacy companies have entered is kind of that future of work conversation. So, obviously, Facebook announced their Horizons. There's a lot of talk about like semi realistic avatar skins. Microsoft is trying to integrate that with their Teams platform so that it becomes a virtual experience on top of that Teams infrastructure, and actually partnering with Facebook, I think, to do it, oddly enough.
Mm.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have like the Minecraft, the Roblox, the Axie Infinity, kind of the gaming spectrum. And so that's kind of how I see like the marketplace shaping up. And then in the middle, there's kind of this nice soft hybrid version where there's more crypto-based projects trying to build community projects of metaverse worlds. And those are trying to like be more like the version of the current world instead of like a segment of it. So if play and work are segments of our lives, they're trying to integrate all those different segments. And so you see that with like crypto voxels and Decentraland and Sandbox to some extent. But that's kind of how I parse the metaverse landscape right now.
That's really, really helpful. Okay, and then just in Web3, there's what, two or three or four main players in that are creating metaverses? Are they interoperable yet? Like, what's the state of the different metaverses
Yeah,
of
the
Web3?
interoperability is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Because right now all these projects are kind of charging ahead with their own roadmap. Some of them are publicly available. So like Decentraland publishes theirs, so you can check where they're going next. Some are not, and then because it is like an investor hungry space right now, different metaverses are taking different approaches to raising capital. And I think the Sandbox just raised 93 and finally released their alpha version this past weekend after like 3 years. Whereas like Decentraland launched in 2014 and their alpha was available to the public in like 2020. So I think I detoured away from your original question, but maybe I answered it in there.
Yeah, so it sounds like, just because we'll probably have something metaverse related in the title, so people are probably just curious about metaverse in general. But metaverse and Web3, Sandbox, Decentraland, what else would you throw on that list?
Probably Somnium Space, probably Crypto Voxels. Those are kind of the names that keep coming up. I think there's another one. I mean, Engine's a little interesting because they're using their blockchain platform to basically try to build like a crypto arcade.
Hmm.
But they're not in and of themselves developing a metaverse. So I think those four are the names that I keep hearing more or less. And yeah, like I said, I'm deep in the Decentraland community,
Yeah.
so I don't always lift my my ears to the newest sounds.
Got it. Okay. So now let's dive into the project. Tell us the origin story, right? I mean, super entrepreneurial. I think Web3 in general and Decentraland in particular is the new frontier. So you're pioneering entrepreneurially into this space. Why are you doing it? How, like, why did this become a thing for you? And then what's the project vision for what we're going to do with your estate?
Right, right. So you know, I'm a social engineer already, um, but I think this just it seemed like an opportunity to do something I hadn't been able to do yet. And for most of my professional life, I've basically been trying to use the organizations I've been a part of to do like massive paradigm shifting economic development work
Mm.
within those organizations. So one of the restrictions was always capital, and the other restriction was always physics. And so as I was kind of exploring like the future opportunity spaces for me, like what I was interested in, they're like, well, let's go somewhere where capital's not prohibitive for me at the moment, and somewhere where physics isn't an issue, and let's just like start to speculate on what we could do with it. And so, like when I was first getting into Decentraland, like nobody was there. And so I was like one of like 8 people in this like massive virtual landscape, just kind of like running around and like checking stuff out. And as far as I could tell, most people that had invested time or money in it so far were just trying to like basically make the cool things from the real world that they like into virtual versions. And so you get a lot of like random houses, you get a lot of people like building their own art galleries. But you also started to see some of the games come along, and these were like they're massive open online game type stuff. And I started this, and this is just going to sound silly without context, but I started in one of these games mining asteroids for loot, which once I accumulate enough loot of the right variety, I can go to a machine that they've designed and exchange that loot for NFTs. And I'm sure we'll get into NFTs and what's behind that. But it was there where I started seeing like the potential for a really dynamic marketplace. Because what NFTs did essentially was they put a carrot out there, and I didn't get the carrot at first. Like I was like, carrots are gross. Like I'm fine just running around. I'm gonna build this space out. But what you learn quickly is that the metaverse is that final frontier of individuality, and there are no limitations on who you are and what you can be. I mean, yes, there are some in terms of the what's available in the game, but my first instinct as like an avatar was just to replicate myself, and so I was just running around as like a replicated version of myself using the stock like clothing available. And so the thing that happens is after 2 weeks, you start to recognize that, well, now when there's like 200 people in the game, you start to recognize that everyone looks the same because they have this like stock body and this stock set of clothing. And so as a result, no one's really an individual. And what allows people to distinguish themselves in this space is the wearable NFTs. So I have like a pair of shoes that was a limited run of like 4,000. And so I know that only 4,000 other people could have that shoe. And that's important because I spend enough time in there that I need people to be able to recognize me. I can't just be like anonymous 099 and just like wear the stock kit and the shades. So that kind of like brings us back to my like journey in my development team, and what we're trying to think through right now is like how do we build carrots into this gameplay, but also do something meaningful. So like my original inclination was to try to create like 1920s Paris combined with like a souk in Marrakesh mixed with like the street art of Bushwick. And that's just because it was like 3 places I liked. I was doing
Yeah.
what everybody else does, right? They like
Right.
smash the things together they like, hoping they'll produce the same results. And I think right now we've opened up the paradigm a lot more to the weird, the fun, the bizarre. Like we were talking last night, and I mentioned to you earlier, just like about what if we made a minesweeper, and you go through 15 floors of this building we have, trying to clear these mines and getting blown up time and time again. But when you finally get to the top, you get your like minesweeper bomb vest NFT. Um,
I
so
love it.
we're just like throwing open the doors right now and pushing what's even possible. So that's why we got a game developer as well as a digital designer. They both work in Unity, which was important for the project. And yeah, we're moving along.
Wow. Okay, so for those who don't know, how do you get in and play games and discover this in Decentraland? Like, is it VR yet, or is it all 2D on screens, or how do you interact with Decentraland?
So it's a super accessible experience right now. It's browser based, no VR goggles needed, no crypto wallet needed. You can play as a guest, so you would just go to play.decentraland.org,
Mm,
and there's two buttons to access it, either as a guest or with your MetaMask wallet or another crypto, I guess, link. And once you enter, you immediately start the avatar creation process. So you pick your body, you pick your clothes, you pick your hair, and then you choose a name, and all of that will be stored on your local device. If you're feeling like moving into like pro mode a little bit more, you can come with like a MetaMask wallet, and that will allow you to, well, Vault will save everything to your wallet. But it makes it like the easiest login and transaction function imaginable. So if I want to, go to the marketplace and buy a new cape, I don't have to like remember my password basically, which is huge. I love the sign in function. It's like, the once you get the wallet set up and you can sign it in everywhere, it's amazing.
wow. Yeah, because okay, so let's talk a little bit about this. Mana is a ERC20, which is a fungible token uh, that a lot of when I see, I believe, uh, in full disclosure, I invested fairly heavily in the ICO, which I believe was 2017, right? With when they did it,
Yeah.
and um, and so Mana is ERC20 on Ethereum, and so when you went and bought your shoes, or or even when you're logging in and tying it to your mask, how much does this cost right now? Because
Oh, dude, it's ridiculous with the gas fees. Like, so when I acquired the Mana, I bought it through Coinbase. And then in order to use it in Decentraland, you have to wrap it in Ethereum. So to buy the land, I had used Ethereum wrapped Mana. Or Mana,
oh,
yeah.
say that again. What do you mean by Ethereum wrap?
Um, so I don't know the tech specs on that, but basically I had to convert my Mana to Ethereum for the transaction so it could operate on or execute on the blockchain.
Sure.
So I converted the Mana to the ERC Mana or Ethereum wrapped Mana, and then bought the land, which is an NFT, which is an ERC 721, I believe. And then after acquiring the land and my name, which is another like NFT, PossumDynamite, by the way, if you see me out there.
Nice.
Then I converted my remaining Mana from Ethereum into Polygon wrapped Mana, because the gas fees on the Polygon sidechain are so much, like we're talking a penny versus like $50. So that's why all the collectibles are on the Polygon chain.
Okay, now let's talk about this. So let's test your technical knowledge. Polygon. Right. And feel free to push back, and I can fill in what I know about all this. Obviously, I'm asking some of these questions just to make sure the audience is aware, but I'm also asking some of it because I don't know myself. Um, what is Polygon? What is this Mana as an ERC20 on Ethereum that then goes on to Polygon? Can you help people sort out what's going on here?
I mean, I think the easiest would be just like a metaphor, basically. If you're thinking about like foreign currency, right? And like if you're traveling from like the US to Europe and you want to transact in cash, and let's say that's me traveling from my Coinbase wallet to Decentraland to buy land, then I would have to go and exchange that money with a financial institution, right? And so basically, the cost of that transaction, the fees that they would charge you, is what Ethereum is doing with the gas fee to register that transaction, moving from one chain to another. Is how I understand it. And then because in Europe, for instance, that fee is super high to do transactions. Maybe then I decide I need to go to China where those transaction fees are lower, and so I change the euro into the yuan, and now I'm able to purchase, clothes and wearables and tickets to events at a much lower fee.
Okay. So the Decentraland community is accepting other currency besides the ERC20 mana on Ethereum. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, and it depends on who's selling stuff. Like if you were going to the casinos, they accept 4 or 5 different kinds of cryptocurrency. So you could just go straight from, like, I think you could go Bitcoin straight from your MetaMask wallet into the Decentraland casino and bet that. Since I'm not a big gambler, I don't actually know if you were to win money with Bitcoin, if they would return you money in Bitcoin, or if they would return it in mana. But those projects are privately held, so I'm imagining that they would probably be required to give you Bitcoin back. But
okay, so in Decentraland, you can transact in any whatever currency you want, any stable coin. It's got to be a cryptocurrency, I'm assuming. Any stable coin or any other coin that's out there, because you can interface with Decentraland however you want. Is that right?
I think if the developer is building a project that is supporting like Tether, then you would be able to transact in a stable coin. I don't know actually what the vision is for the number of coins in the marketplace, but I haven't seen anything yet that would lead me to believe that there were any restrictions.
Okay. Now coming back to Polygon, what is Polygon and why is it cheaper and why are you able to use it?
I can just give you like the stock answer because I'm not deep on the Polygon side, but because the gas fees on Ethereum were too expensive, Polygon was a sidechain fork that had increased, I believe, increased capacity in their block size, if I'm remembering my Polygon correctly. And so they were able to process more faster and cheaper. I think they also are, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think they are a proof of stake blockchain as opposed to Ethereum's proof of work blockchain.
My basic understanding, and I'm not deep into Polygon, but the difference between a sidechain and a rollup, right? A rollup is trying to do an L2 to now enable the transactions to happen at speed and scale, but then also have the authority of the L1 with the main Ethereum chain. Polygon, from my understanding, is a side chain, so it's literally, like you said, like a fork where they tweaked some things and did the proof of stake things. And so the interoperability between Polygon and Ethereum is different than what it would be from a rollup. I will put more notes in the show notes so people who are interested in that nuance can learn more, including probably myself needs to get a little deeper in there. There's like a million of those in Web3 right now. Like, I should learn more about that. I should learn more about that. So part of even navigating Web3 is the big challenge right now. And both of us are part of this Web3 product manager training DAO that I'm excited to share more in future podcasts here. But all right, so thanks for the Polygon detour. Now let's talk about pumping your project. Right? Let's show what you're doing. How can people find you do you have something up right now where people can go interact with what you're doing? How can people follow your progress with your team? Do you have things online? Can people join a DAO? Where are you at?
You're all DAO all the time now, Will. So right now, I'm doing an Eventbrite series. Every Tuesday night, the hour kind of rotates a little bit, but it's called Metaversal Education. And it's about an hour, and I try to bring a guest host along with me, and we bring people through their first experience in Decentraland, from creating avatars to movement to using emotions in the space, and then we take them on a tour to some of like the prime sites in town. And so if you were trying to track us down there, you could find us on Eventbrite under the event name Metaversal Education. If you're just running around the metaverse, I am my coordinates are -5829.
Hey.
And right now, our scene is just a welcome scene for Metaversal Education. So instead of making it something like super futuristic and sci-fi and funky, I kept it super basic and just put some trees and a campfire and like a little log. So it was something like homey that people could kind of relax in without like the frenetic pace of dropping into a casino for the first time. So in addition to doing that kind of as a freebie to get people excited about the space, I do corporate work in that space. So we do metaversal education for corporate clients, and then actually extend that into metaverse strategy. So brands that are trying to get into the metaverse space and either commercialize it or advertise. I know my plug earlier on advertising was opposed, but I think, you know, a reasonable person would be open to understanding that that is going to be a thing.
Of
Um,
course.
and then I guess if you want to follow along on our progress, I'll just probably be using my LinkedIn. And if I get really ambitious and get over my social media fear, we do have a PossumDynamite Twitter handle where I make sporadic announcements about the project, but mostly just complain about gas fees.
Uh, okay. Now, did Polygon fix the gas fee? See, are there
Oh yeah,
are
Polygon's
there
great.
NFTs and other things like what can you do with Polygon that you can't do? Is the community coming around Polygon? I'm just wondering why doesn't everybody just use Polygon and then nobody uses Ethereum because it's too expensive?
That's actually a good question. I don't know. I know that unless you're purchasing land on OpenSea, you have to purchase it in Ethereum wrap mana. You can't purchase it in Polygon. And my suspicion is that's because the purchase goes to the DAO, like if the DAO is selling the land and not an individual owner, instead of being burned, so that it keeps some fluidity in the mana ecosystem, as opposed to Polygon. But everything else, other than names, other than NFTs that are in Decentraland, which are the names and the land, everything else is being transacted with Polygon right now in world.
Okay, so now let's go a little more detailed. You said you had a log, a campfire, a little welcome message. You could go to play.decentraland.org
Yep.
and you could go to the coordinates you just mentioned and you would see that. How did you, how does this, now let's go under the hood. How did you get that log there? Did you have to program a log and stick it somewhere on some smart contract or some blockchain somewhere? How is it rendering when you go on? Does Decentraland have some centralized servers where all these things are rendered? How did you even get to that first step once you bought land and got permission to use that to actually put your campfire on there? How did all that work?
So they had some foresight when it comes down to that. There's a standard. It's called Builder, and it basically has 3D, like a menu of 3D items you can drag and drop and
Okay.
resize and rotate. And it has different, there's a pirate kit and there's like you know, an, yeah, that was really easy for like the newbie. What I'm doing now and why I needed more partners is because I needed somebody that could write into the SDK and provide more levels of functionality than the standard builder mode. So Decentraland will take like any 3D rendering file type that is, I want to say it's GLab, and this again where I'm showing my software ignorance here. But you're able to use like a free 3D rendering program like Blender, which has a ton of functionality, and then import that back into the game.
But
And
these must be centralized servers that
they're
decentralized.
decentralized. That's part of the Decentraland is their decentralized servers.
How
Um,
do you know the technical like it sounds like you just
no,
described some software program that's got to be sitting, and this is a cloud or you download it onto your computer,
it's a cloud.
so you access it via a web browser,
Yep,
and you're telling me the infrastructure around that is all decentralized?
I believe so.
I would love. Okay, if you don't know the technical details, I'm going to do some digging. I got to definitely have some more show notes in this that I typically have. Um, but how much of the technical details can you share?
I mean, the technical when it gets to like back end cloud architecture is I'm just going to jabber and probably make a fool of myself.
Okay. Okay. All right. So they made it easy. You bought land. That land gave you access to an interface where you could make your own little fireplace and log and text. And then you pressed a button, and then all of a sudden, everybody in the metaverse can see your thing.
Yep.
Okay. And that's where it's at right now. You can go in and interact and hang out in the metaverse and talk with people and chat. Do they have voice and everything, or how is it?
They enabled voice last year. When I take people in there, I still use like a traditional like Zoom or other conference call system,
Sure.
just because people unfamiliar with it. I think they use a directional algorithm. So if you're not facing the right way, you won't be hearing what the people you're in there with are saying.
Ah,
So it's really impressive, but if you're trying to hang out with like a group of people, it can be a little clunky. So there's voice now. I think their next move is mobile, so that you'll be able to play on your phone. I don't see a lot of aspiration to go VR real quick from them, which I actually think is probably a good thing. I think we have a question in our hands of whether or not people want to strap 4 pounds to their face just to hang out. Um,
right.
and then I think the other thing, and you mentioned this a little bit, is like that we're struggling with is philosophically, if this land or if this experience is like ephemeral, is the architecture permanent? So if we can swap a scene, like you said, like that, do we want to make a place where I can change the architecture from like hour to hour? Does it make sense? Like if I'm running a consulting business in the metaverse, do I want a different office for each client I have? Do I want a different experience for each client? So do I have 8 work games that are about collaboration and creativity, and I have 8 clients throughout the day, and I just switch the land every hour? So that dimension of impermanence opens up, I think, a whole new idea about like the concentration of economic activity. Because if
So
you can
I
have,
could be somebody in the metaverse hanging out at the coordinates. Can you name the coordinates again, just so maybe I can get
yeah, negative 5930.
So if I'm at negative 5930, how big are the coordinates, by the way?
So
What's
each parcel is 16 meters by 16 meters.
right?
And so I have 32 feet or 32 meters by 32 meters, or about 100 square feet on a side.
Okay. So if I'm hanging out in those coordinates, and you do the switching thing, would it just be like a WebSocket into my browser, and it would just instantly, I'd be sitting there, and then you swap offices, or can you
Yeah,
kick people out of your land?
it would. So right now, the only way well, no, you can't really kick anybody out. You could basically put a wall up on every side and nobody could get in, but then neither would you. Um,
Okay, so you can't have can you have a door that only people with certain NFTs can get in?
I think so. We haven't explored that yet. Right now, because it is such like a community-minded project, I think most people are just like, yeah, come in, come in. Like there's no exclusionary access yet. I think we will get there. It wouldn't surprise me too if we ended up with like parallel servers. So right now, I can be at the same coordinates as someone, but technically be in a different realm because they're on a different server. And we would not actually see each other be able to interact. Now they could force their way back onto my server. Um,
Oh,
but they might by default, or because their bandwidth or their GPU is too slow, they might get kicked to like a less populated server.
I got it. Yeah, a lot of games have that same thing. You go into some community area, but they only let like
Right.
20, 30 people in because obvious hardware constraints.
Now, my nerd self from my urban planning days and thinking about policy in this space is if everybody, because I'm not on a road, which is the only designated open parcel, if everybody around me built an impermeable wall around my site, no one could just walk up to it. They would have to teleport to it, which is kind of a coin flip. Like I don't know if that's good or bad in the future. I assume teleportation is going to become the primary mode of travel because it's just so much faster. But theoretically, all my neighbors could be jerks and like block my access to my own building from like a pedestrian path.
Oh, so they need urban planners.
So yeah, in my head, I'm like, well, in the DAO, should I put in a proposal that everybody needs to do like a 1/3 meter setback?
Wow. Or they just need best practice city planning, right? All these smart cities and all these urban planners that are designing all the new cities, they just need to bring all those best practices into Decentraland.
Yeah, and I think what we're gonna see is a lot of like empty first floors. Like, when you go to like a city that has like a lot of towers and their first floor is basically like all retail and you can go through on all four sides and they're so I think the buildings that are most successful right now kind of have this open first floor because you don't have to figure out how to get in, which there's some fun and discovery and exploration and gameplay and like trying to figure out how to use a space with no instructions. But like if you can't get in or out of the space, that's like not fun, that's frustrating.
Right. Okay. All right. I could go down that rabbit hole forever, but let's come back to your project. What's the vision for people who come to it? Obviously, you're doing the education right now, which is Metaversal Education. That's awesome. Where are you heading with it? You said you have developers now. What's cast vision? Like where are we heading with your estate?
I think what we're heading toward is maybe like the first kind of arcade in Decentraland. So you would be able to kind of wander through this space. We want to bring in like a lot of puzzle elements. So like to get into this secret door, you would have to solve this like tiny little crypto puzzle, like cryptographic puzzle, like code breaking, right? And then you enter the room, and it would take you to this alternative game environment where you play the game, and then it would bring you back into the Decentraland estate. And so as you kind of wandered through the building, there would be different games you would play. Um, I'm leaving some of that creativity to my game developer, who's been working on some different projects in this space for a while now. Um, Again, the thing that you and I have talked about is like I also want it to be a really creative space, and like creative in world. So we're trying to figure out the coding behind importing software, or excuse me, importing spray paint, and being able to use the spray paint as an object in the metaverse space to create murals, and potentially partnering with a graffiti collective out of New York to do that.
Wow. Maybe they
Um,
could come in and just instantly create an NFT with their art. Maybe because they come into your space, you take a small cut of that, but it becomes a shared NFT ownership or something.
yeah, I think that's one of the visions, and then we'd have to go mint it on the Polygon blockchain after they created it.
Right. Right.
But yeah, the vision is just like we're not trying really hard to monetize it in the first like 1 to 3 years. It's
Yeah.
really an experimental space.
Right.
We want to see what people like. Everybody thought these NFT galleries were going to be like big destinations, and it turns out nobody really likes to go to an NFT gallery and just like hang out, at least as they're presented now. So the two areas that have a lot of user interest are, or I guess three, is the wearable NFTs, the game environment, and then any of the events. So Decentraland last year had a 4-day like music festival, 50,000 attendees. I think they had 80 artists. Dead Mouse and Paris Hilton like headlined the last show. Participants were getting like airdrops of NFT wearables that were like unique to that festival. And so they're doing that again next year. They just announced. So hopefully that generates the same interest. And that's kind of our timeline that we're measuring against. We want to have kind of our parcel pimped out by the time we get to next summer, and the whole
Wow.
descend on Decentraland.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So a head nod to the future Web3 product managers listening in.
Okay.
You obviously you've doubled down on Decentraland, but it's important for people that are working to build new things on Web3, either themselves um, or working with companies that are coming into this space. What besides what we've already talked about, what do product managers need to know about metaverse in general? Well, let's see, Web3 metaverse in general, and Decentraland in particular, when making decisions? Is there anything that comes to mind that we haven't already talked about that the product managers should know when making sort of business and artistic decisions in Decentraland?
Um, that is a good question, Will. Um, I mean, I think it's definitely important for any product manager in the crypto space right now to have a long view and to not get too wrapped up in the minute to minute.
Yeah.
There's just too much volatility in the space, and that's affecting me right now on what I can do in Decentraland with the value of the currency at the moment.
Mm.
So we had plans to reinvest and acquire some more land, and it's just like out of our reach right now. So
Mm.
anything that is pegged to a fungible token that's going to have float value that
People are going to
50,000
speculate
crypto
on it.
nerds
Yeah.
can nerd out on and pamp all day long. You're going to have some like blips in the development roadmap. The other thing is it was just how hard it was to recruit a team. I'm not paying well, so I can't really blame people for not flocking to me. But the artistic, creative, technical skills to design and animate and make things real in that space are a dimension beyond the content creator skills that we've honed over the last like 2 decades. So you're obviously now working in 3D, right? So that's your extra dimension there. But you need to do movement. You need to like work with physics engines. You need to understand how clothes drape and the weight that you would assign to different parts. So the level of complexity and the talent able to handle that is I think there'll be a mismatch for a while. And so like one of the things I was pitching people on when I was trying to recruit is like, look, I can't promise you a lot of money. I'm not trying to really monetize this space at the moment. But if we can figure out the skills that are needed to do some really cool stuff in this virtual environment, you'll be some of the first people doing real cool stuff in this environment because it's still open and there's not a lot of talent flooding that direction.
Where? Oh wow. Okay. Oh, okay. So many questions. I'm trying to organize my thoughts here. So why not form a DAO? I mean, are you doing this? Why not form a DAO and then have your own mechanics by which the ownership of the DAO that controls your land, you can sort of use that as a functional equity to pay people to crank away? Are you're just not at that point right now, or like how are you thinking?
No, we've thought about it. We've talked about it. I think the only thing stopping us is we just really haven't made a final determination on percentages. And I think what we're leaning toward is that we'll split revenue, but myself and my friends and family investment group will probably retain ownership and equity of the land, but split any profits going forward. And so that'll probably be administered through a DAO.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool. All right, this has been a fantastic part one. I am looking forward to having you back on the show to talk more about it. So final 2 questions. Any last words about just the space in general? What excites you about it for the investors, entrepreneurs listening in that are curious about this world? And then obviously where can people find you in addition to what you've already talked about? Where can people find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think last word on the space, and without breaking too many NDAs, what gets me really excited about the metaverse is just the potential to aggregate a lot of emerging technologies and execute through this space. So when I think about like the future of wearables and get excited about it, it's not necessarily the wearable itself. It's the idea that that wearable has intellectual property embedded in it that can be turned into a real product with like additive printing. So theoretically, I could buy a shoe that has a limited run of 2,000 and print it out and wear it in real life as well. And so I think that kind of interplay between physical and non-physical is going to be the really exciting part. And that, we're not there yet. But I wanted to get in the game before it became really gross and muddy and do some fun and clever stuff before all the big money came in. And I think we're on the cusp of that. So I'm going to stay excited.
Good.
I wish Facebook had been a little quieter about their meta announcement for like 3 to 5 years. But you can't control Zuck, so you can only contain him. So let's try to. I want to get in there first before Facebook's metaverse ruins all our lives for a second time.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, you can't find me on Facebook.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I technically have an account still, but I haven't logged in maybe a decade.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to track me down, you can find me at LinkedIn, Josh Vitulli. My website is longtailstudios.com. Or if you got a great memory and just want to shoot me an email, joshvitulli@gmail.com.
Love it. Love it. I'll put those, maybe not your email address unless you give me permission, but I'll put those in the show notes. And yeah, Josh, this has been incredible. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and insight and experimentation thus far and thoughts on design. And yeah, really appreciate your time.
Cool. Thanks, Will. I'm happy to come back whenever you want to jam again.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Bye, bud.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you and your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it would be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.